Hi, I'm Diane Neubauer, or my Chinese name, Du Yanzi. I'm going to come back and talk today about very beginning reading designed for your students. Last time I made a little video using Jell-O and gummy candy to show a way to design reading material for your beginners, but who have a little bit of Chinese language in their heads already and can read some Chinese already. So I want to go back and talk about, well, what do you do when it's totally new? They haven't read a text in Chinese script before. This also, I think, applies to people who maybe use a flashcard system or do something where you isolate individual characters and practice with those, but now you want them to read a text. There's a big jump, I think, between those two skill sets. And so this kind of reading design might help you make their first reading steps more enjoyable and approachable, even if you do pre-teach Chinese characters. I don't. This is the way that I actually introduce Chinese character text. It's going to look like the analogy I'm going to give you using gummy candy again, because it's so much fun. I'm also going to show you, as a follow-up to that previous video, the gummy candy and the Jell-O have cooperated with my analogy, and they're kind of molding the way I was saying that this is what we want to have happen in the minds of our students. They get some words in reading, and it starts to kind of become part of that network up in their head of the language and what they can read. So I'll show you both of those things when we're in the kitchen in a moment. Okay, back to the kitchen. And here's the Jell-O about 3 days after I made that first video. So yeah, we've been eating it. But look at the size of the gummy candy. If you see those gummy eggs, they've really expanded in size. So there's one of the gummy eggs, which I think is very helpful for my analogy here. Tiny little raspberry to this huge raspberry in there. What's cool about this is my idea with this analogy is that as your students start reading those pieces of language that you've stirred into this Jell-O of language they already knew, it's going to mold and become one thing, and then you can add a little bit more. Interestingly enough, it's become very soft. You can slice it. This is not something you can do with a normal gummy. So it worked out really nicely. If you see this, like I cannot cut that gummy frog with a spoon. But in the Jell-O, now that it's had time to simmer, the equivalent would be students have re-encountered that language in their reading material again and again. And now it's kind of one thing for them. So that was pretty cool. But for now, I wanted to talk about very beginning reading. We had an analogy of that they had some language in their heads last time. And that was the big bowl of Jell-O that was empty of no gummies yet. But right now, let's say it's your very beginning students, first week or two of class. They've never read anything in Chinese script before. So they kind of got this. And Chinese script is not phonetically written, so there's not a way to tie it into language that they might know by sound or by pinyin necessarily. So if you don't want to have them do a lot of self-study or a lot of practice with tying up pinyin to characters and then only later on introducing reading, here's a way that you can design reading material that will be more accessible to them. So this is the most gummy candy I've bought in my life, right here for this analogy. So we've got some more. I've separated out some colors. These are little tiny gummy bear cubs. They're super cute. And so let's imagine these are a couple of words like maybe da or la, things that are tiny little pieces of language but that do something functional in the sentence. And then maybe we've got a few more words over here in these bigger gummies. Each of the colors representing one item that they've encountered a lot in their auditory input, and you know that they can understand well when they hear it. So this is, you can tell this by they answer questions really quickly and confidently that use that depend on understanding those words. And probably some of your really fast processing students, really quick students, are probably starting to use those words naturally and accurately. So those are the ones we're going to put in here. But now we only have these gummy pieces. So how do we arrange them? Do we want to take you know, all of the one phrase here that was represented by this egg, and just kind of pile them up there, or maybe even just kind of mix them in together with these two. I mean, it's obviously two pieces of language, right? We want to hide it better. And so something like this. Let's say you've got this one phrase that you've introduced, like 在家里, at home. And so you want to put different people's names, 妈妈在家里, 妈妈不在家里, I don't know. Getting different things in different combinations. So we've got a sprinkle here and there of these different words mixed in together in meaningful ways in different sentences and different combinations. So that the idea is they're going to be in this one reading, but they're going to re-encounter those so many different times with your support so that you know that they're tying meaning to what they're reading. So you've got something that's not focused on just vocabulary knowledge, but it's, if you can imagine this kind of smushing together, they're re-encountering it in lots of different ways. They're seeing these different words and phrases used in different contexts within that first reading, even in that first reading. You're keeping it simple. You know, I've selected 8. That's kind of a good max, I think. Phrases or words for that very, very first reading, if you can keep it 8 items or less, I think you're going to do better off with that, because they're going to re-encounter them enough and they're going to see them enough to start to have that retained in their visual memory, and they're going to recognize it on their own next time. So, so the idea then here is, after this first reading, which doesn't look very pretty right now, remember that kind of jello formation. So this is going to sit in there. They're going to re-encounter this again. You read together with the whole class using this reading. Maybe you do it a second way with a different purpose. So maybe the second time you're going to read and ask students their opinions of every 4th sentence in there. Or you're going to make a true-false statement every so often in there. You're going to ask them to compare to someone else. Maybe somebody in the story that you have prepared for them thinks this, but what would so-and-so think instead? So you're trying to get them wheels turning about the meaning while they're re-encountering these things in written form for the first time. And then as they do that, then you're going to give them a chance to do some more reading on their own. They're going to re-encounter these many ways. And then this is going to mulge into that kind of initial jello that we started with yesterday. So there's the, I think, final gummy and jello analogy for writing reading material for your students. One last thought. Why would you do this? Why would you not provide authentic materials? Maybe a children's book, maybe a menu, or a bus station timetable or something. Why would we not use that for reading for our students? Do that too, but the purpose is very different. They're going to be picking out words they can recognize, but they're not going to be able to understand at what's called a discourse level, because they're so much beginners in the language. They don't have all the vocabulary they need to understand everything they see in that authentic material yet. So that's why we want to design reading that's at discourse level. It's got conversations, or it's got stories or descriptions and narrations. They're longer pieces, like paragraphs, that are still using simple language for our students, because that reinforces the language that we're sharing with them in the classroom, and then it ties that in to their experience with reading, so that they don't just have to read single words here and there. They can actually read and draw meaning from a whole written story, even as a very beginner in Chinese, when you design with that in mind. Thanks. Hope this helps.